Converge is one of my favorite bands, but I cannot sit and listen to Converge all day.
Right.
Especially like when I'm driving to work at 7 a.m.
Yeah, right. Because I'm always cracking this in the middle of the podcast, and I haven't gotten any messages with people being like what's Spencer drinking in the middle of an episode, but I thought it would be better just to do it at the beginning. What are you drinking yourself?
It's ginger ale mixed with raspberry or strawberry lemonade.
Oh, that's pretty fancy. Nice little bev check on the podcast.
There's not much. I don't have many options around here.
That's fair. Cool. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. This is another episode of the Scoped Exposure podcast. I'm super excited to be sitting down with I would say like a Calgary hardcore, staple. OG. Yeah. Andrew, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for letting me reach out and talk to you about some stuff.
Yeah. And I appreciate it. I know it's kind of I think we're going to dive into a number of good topics about OG Calgary Hardcore days, because you don't live there anymore. I found out when we were figuring out the timing of when to do this. So you moved to Manitoba, where I'm from, pretty recently. Is that right?
Yeah, I've been here for maybe I've been here since October.
Okay.
So I do nothing. It was just funny because I was when I was listening to Jesse talk on the last one or a couple ones ago, he was saying he's from Dauphin. So I live in, I don't know how well, you obviously know Manitoba well.
Sure. So
I live in Minnedosa.
Yeah.
So it's a town of...
Not to be confused with Minnesota in the States.
And your GPS will take you there.
Yeah.
So I moved out here. I got engaged. Well, my fiance has 3 children. Mm-hmm. So her moving to Calgary was not an option.
Right.
Because her divorce isn't finalized with her ex-husband. So I got laid off from my job at the airport and I was just screw it.
Yeah.
So I just popped all my stuff in my car and just drove out here.
That's awesome. I've actually been to Minnedosa, I think maybe 2 times. I many moons ago when I was I went to a Christian college for 1 year and I got opted to play on the worship team because I was one of the only musically inclined people, and we played a show in Minnedosa. And then I think the second time we just went through there, me and my wife were just doing some camping in the area. It is really, really nice area, but like you said, there's not a lot around there to do.
No, because we live if you know Manitoba, we're 2 hours from Winnipeg, 2 hours from Regina, and we're smack in the middle between Neepawa and Brandon.
Yeah. So if you need to get anything in town, so to speak, you would probably be going to Neepawa or Brandon to do those things.
No, there's a little mom and pop shop called Kim's Grocery Store. I don't know what they do, if it's illegal or not, because they just go to Winnipeg or Regina or whatever and just buy stuff from Superstore and Costco and overprice to sell it.
Whoa. Well, shout out to Kim's.
We do have a co-op, so that's pretty much basically where we do our shopping, unless we go to Brandon or something like that.
Right. Yeah, but to do any more niche shopping like vinyl or anything like that, that's doing a trip or doing an online order. But
I have become a lot more with online orders in iTunes right now.
Right. Yeah. I feel that. But Andrew, we haven't done really a proper introduction of who you are. So could you tell me your name, I guess, how you're best known in hardcore and those kind of things?
Yeah, of course. My name's Andrew. A lot of people that would probably watch this would know me as Hammy, Hamtaro, Hamzilla, Hamalicious. So I started going to shows when I was probably 14 years old, and I'm 34 now. Mm-hmm. So I've seen a lot of people come and go. I've seen a lot of bands in really weird venues. I played in a band called Where Shadows Lie, which was just a really crappy metalcore band. Sure. Like, we were just awful. And then I played in another band with dudes from Nikola Tesla, Life at Last, Born for Battle, As Astrea Falls, called Far From Skinny. Okay. Which we were just a bunch of fat guys that would, you know, throw hamburgers out and do like Hatebreed and Stretch Armstrong covers. And we would just like throw Timbits out, burgers.
Like into the crowd, so to speak?
Yeah. Yeah. And instead of like having water bottles, we'd have like milkshakes.
It is like just all the messes at all the venues that you guys were playing at, it sounds like.
Not really. Like, we weren't too bad. A lot of bands really liked it because when we played with like, I think we played with Roses Dead, and they just like ate up all the burgers, like any burger that they could find. They're just like, we don't have to buy food for this local show.
Honestly, more bands should do that because, you know, like that's the struggle when you're at a show and, you know, I'm fine that because I'm always like trying to film every single band at these shows, and I'm either just starving myself the entire show, let alone like a festival, or I have like a few like granola bars in like my pocket. I'm just trying to wolf them down in between. But if you're a band that's thought about throwing burgers or Timbits, you know, and any of the American listeners who are listening, a Timbit is like a donut, probably like a golf ball size. That is really funny.
It's a donut hole.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a good way to explain it. And was that just purely for shits and gigs, as far as like, well, like this is what our band's called, like we might as well just throw that in our live performances as well?
Well, there was a band around the same time called Far From Over. Okay. I've been trying to like think all week of bands and like where like stuff happened. Right. And we just were called Far From Skinny. Like, you know, our first show, like we all wore like short shorts and like medium-sized t-shirts, and of course like we're all like 300 pounds or like just bigger guys. And yeah, like we would have like, it would say Far From Skinny. We got shirts actually made that said Far From Skinny on the back. It would say like stupid things like I kicked Arexia's ass and stuff like that. Or
that's awesome. When you first said that, like Far From Skinny, I thought it had some relation to like Adam in Calgary, like who's normally goes by Skinny, but you know, the fact that you guys were just rocking the, you know, dad.
You mean Andrew?
Yeah, Andrew. Sorry. Yeah, I think I said
his brother is Adam.
Oh yeah, I didn't know that. I'm probably just slipped up on the name. Before you move on, I know. Sorry,
I was Fat Andrew. Oh. I was Fat Andrew, and he was Skinny Andrew.
I got you.
Yeah.
How did you get, you know, you mentioned the name Ham or Hamtaro. How'd you get that name? I feel like there's a story there.
So when I was in grade 5, all during school, I was kind of bullied a lot. And then I was friends with these kids in like grade 6. And then they just started calling me Ham. And then it just spiraled.
I gotcha.
So it's just like, it went by Hammy for the longest time. And then Jeff, he just started calling me anything to do with ham and making any name up with ham in it. Right. So yeah, that's essentially like I just embraced it, and then it kind of just started.
Yeah,
and that's how more people knew me.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like that's a tried and true thing with a lot of nicknames. Like I was playing in a band, and this is around the time like. Just before I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, so my farts were just insane. So we'd be like jamming, and I would just like stink up the room. Not of, you know, I guess like, I don't know. That gets into a whole nother subject that I'll share on a different podcast. But that's people were saying like, "Oh, Spencer, you spiced up the room." So everyone was calling me Spicy Spence for the longest time, and I hated it. But then eventually, like you said, I'm just like, fuck it, I'm gonna rock this name, and now it's like people I work with would just like call me by that. I'm like, well, like this is the only podcast where I've actually revealed that. So, Well, as you know, I'm sure you've listened to a number of the different podcasts here. I always like to get the origin stories on how people got into like listening to heavier music or more DIY music. So can you kind of roll back the clock and take me back in time to those first couple records, those first show experiences where it like really latched onto you and, really kept you as long as you have in hardcore?
Like I started out as like a new metal kid. Like I loved like Limp Bizkit, Korn, Slipknot, Cold Chamber.
Yeah.
All those bands. Like I think my first show I was in grade 7 and it was Cold Chamber, Slipknot in 1994, I think, because it's when the first Slipknot album came out.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So that was like when I started, and then it kind of just like I started going to, there used to be a venue called the Multicultural Center in the East Village when the East Village was not a nice place.
Right, yeah.
It was like all drug dealers and heroin addicts and hookers. But it was just like, I don't know, like, and seeing bands like Knucklehead, Downway, Belvedere every week, strung out at community centers. And then I started going to hardcore shows, and there was a band called Wreck It that they were awful, but they were actually really not good at the same time. They were just metalcore, and it was just weird. And it was like, now I kind of like, then I would think that they were horrible, but now I'm like, oh, like they were actually pretty cool.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
And then lots of bands.
Yeah.
And then like lots of bands like, I think one of the two first hardcore bands that I was really into was Poison the Well, and there was a band from Edmonton called Compromise. I'm sure a lot of people know that story if you're from Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of skyrocketed from there. Like back in the days of like Napster and stuff, like you just look for more music, and you just, you would buy comps and stuff like that back when, music stores were a thing and you could buy comps for like $5 or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
And then like, cause I didn't know what hardcore was.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a fest called Hoodie Hardcore Fest. And that's kind of where I started learning more about it. And then like, I was known as like the dude that always wore, like, I didn't know that I was listening to hardcore. Like I wore like a Hatebreed shirt, like almost every day. And I had no idea they were a hardcore band.
Yeah. There are a number of people who like, hardcore kids nowadays come from all waves of music, whether it's, listening to like pop punk and then like, moving into that, or people like you said, have listened to Limp Bizkit and Slipknot and new metal bands all their life and then got into that. Punk kids, obviously. So, there's a weird time where you actually realize the different subgenres of like, okay, this is punk rock, this is hardcore, like these are the attributes that makes something hardcore. And it's not necessary. I guess that's up for debate, and I'm not sure if we'll go there as far as like a tuning that makes a hardcore band, or like a style, or the things that are sung about. But like it is definitely different nowadays when it comes to like finding out about new music, like you said.
Like the thing that I find really cool is like stuff like, Scoped Exposure, Hate 5-6, 197, like especially like just hearing bands that I've never really heard, or like getting stoked on bands that like, I wouldn't really have a chance to see.
Sure.
Like I'm amped to see the last Bane set tomorrow or today. I don't know when it comes out.
Yeah, I think it's today, as far as the date of recording this. But yeah, that's something. When I was first getting into hardcore, and then obviously like Hate 5-6, Sonny was like a huge influence on me. It was always like this last Bane set was always this like tease, this big meme, and I honestly never knew if it was ever going to get announced, or if it was always going to be this thing that I guess Sonny was holding on to. But now it's like, I'm very excited to watch it myself tonight for sure.
Yeah.
That was actually something that I was thinking about, like just before we got on the call here, is that I know a lot of people who maybe are, maybe 10 years older than me that kind of got to experience that era of hardcore where there wasn't things like, Hey 56 or the internet, or like, there was different ways that people were finding out about bands, and maybe shows were bigger and, just more activity. And especially in smaller towns too, like, Minnedosa, like nowadays you would never imagine to have like a hardcore show, but like maybe a few years ago, like, 5-10 years ago, like that could possibly be a thing, or even the town surrounding it. So I'm curious.
I think more towns surrounding it.
Yeah.
Like I know there's some shows. I know Brandon has had shows because of elder abuse.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I don't think like nowadays there would be any. Like everyone's pretty old and everyone stares at me weird, so I don't know. Like, I think they got their first tattoo shop like 6 months ago.
Oh, really? Oh, but it's probably like not a like quote unquote good tattoo shop as far as like the style being a certain way.
No comment.
No. That's fair. I'm probably gonna catch some heat, but I don't care. But going back to that, I've had conversations with people being like, I feel like it's not necessarily a cop-out, but I feel like it's an unfair state. Like there's been multiple conversations I've had with people maybe who are like closer to your age than mine, who have far more years in hardcore, that say, oh, I don't know if like there's a reason for someone to go to a show if they can watch it, but then in the same breath talk about shows like 15-20 years ago, and they're like, yeah, I kind of wish I had that on film that I can watch that back. So I don't know what your perspective or thoughts on that are as far as the pros and cons when it comes to, I guess, like what I or Sonny or Steven does.
Well, like I think it's really cool, like especially all the like old tapes that Sonny's getting, like the old Hellfest videos and stuff.
Yeah.
Like those are like shows that like I would have dreamed to go to.
Yeah.
And then I watch like, there's bands that like I wasn't into or I haven't heard, and now I'm really getting into them. So yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious if there's been any notable bands that I put on the channel or even just had on the podcast that you've like checked out. Like I'm always curious on like what certain people are like really latching on, because I might see a band and I'm like, oh yeah, this is definitely a band that I'm gonna fuck with long after we post it. But yeah, I'm just kind of curious if anything's off the top of your head.
That Tony Montana band.
Yeah.
And like Inclination, I really got into after seeing, even though they didn't have their singer at the Evan Shaw Memorial Show,
right?
Seeing other videos of them and stuff like that. I started to really like Stepping Stone. And it's just cool seeing like newer bands. Like I love Trench. I think Trench is 100%. Hands down the best band in Calgary.
Yep.
And I think I wish some people could have seen some of the shows that I seen. Like one that sticks out, seeing Modern Life is War at the Bridgeland Community Center in like front of 5 people, or 10 people watching the Acacia Strain and On Broken Wings. Rise Against a Snapchat at a community center called Carpenters in the middle of Kensington.
Oh yeah, I remember you sending. Was it Rise Against in Snapcase?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
And this old punk band called the Riot Nerds.
That's awesome. And just going off of what you just said, like none of those shows necessarily might have been like crazy, like activity, people moshing and doing stuff, but like the fact that to timestamp that, especially for Calgary, I 100% agree that would be really, really cool.
Yeah. And like there was also like, tours that I went to, like Sounds of the Underground and like stuff like that. Mm-hmm. It's always nice to see like shows that you've seen, like, but I like hate seeing myself on video and stuff. So like if you watch the Ramallah set from 2017's This Is Hardcore, I'm in it way too many times and I hate it.
Okay. I need to dive into that because I've seen a couple like random tweets and things like that where it's like, and these are from homies that like I know like really appreciate with what I do, but for some reason it's like there are some people that might watch one of my videos because of some cool like mosh thing they did or some stage dive, and then there's some people being like, I am really happy Spencer didn't fly out to film this. I'm like, well, why not? Like, is it just like, oh, there's me being a mosh mutant or whatever it is?
Mosh warrior.
And, yeah.
And I don't know, like I've just never been comfortable with seeing myself on video and stuff. It's just really weird to me because I feel like I'm an idiot sometimes. So
that's fair. Yeah. And like, I don't know. Like my career is also in video, so like I have dealt with lots of people where like I'm so used to just cameras and being in front of cameras, being behind cameras, and so many people just haven't been, like, pun intended, exposed to that. So it's kind of foreign to them. But yeah, I think the very first time I filmed the Calgary set, you were in some of those videos for sure. And that's why I was like, oh yeah, and Andrew's been like around for a minute, so I'm sure you've seen the progression of Scoped as well over the years.
Yeah, and like back when I started going to shows, it would be like, I guess it's like when you grow older, you prefer to watch the band, and like when I like first started going to shows, and for a long time, people would just like watch the pit the whole time, and I think now I just think that's kind of lame.
Right.
But I used to be dabble into some alcohol before shows, so I've made a lot of stupid mistakes and stuff like that. So
gotcha.
So I don't drink anymore.
Yeah. That was actually a question that I was thinking about today, as far as like you corrected me because you prefer the term mosh warrior. And I think like a lot of people talk about like mosh retirement as like this thing that they can just like choose whenever it is, like, and it's I've heard it sometimes where it's like, oh, like I got punched in the face and got a broken nose, or like something happened, and after that I don't mosh anymore. But it's like, well, did you swing and hit someone, or did someone swing and hit you? So I'm curious if there's an actual point where someone can mosh retire, because if you think of people like Evan McIsaac, who like talk about like the importance of moshing when bands come through your town, as far as like, yeah, like, almost strategically, like being like, okay, all of us are just going to beat the shit out of each other when bands come to town, because they'll remember that when they're thinking about, planning a tour and coming through.
I don't think mosh retirement you don't choose it chooses you. Like, okay. So back when I would drink and go to shows, I would start moshing and stuff, and then like, it's literally you have like a hangover, and then you have a full body hangover. Right. And I'm not like, there's dudes like Evan McIsaac that are like so in shape, and I'm fat. So yeah. It's like, and I already have like a really bad back, like from just years of just destroying my body. So right. Like lugging around kegs, I used to bartend. So yeah, it's just kind of, my body just can't handle it anymore.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think it can, but it can't.
Yeah. Like I am thinking off the top of my head of those really hectic, chaotic sets, and knowing the people who are like the ones that I've seen going hard all throughout the set. I know all those dudes hit the gym on the regular, and there's not like it's definitely a very it takes a lot out of you for sure, and especially when you have fists and kicks flying at you at all ends.
Yeah, like I think one of the major ones that was kind of stuck out in my eyes was I got a concussion during 100 Demons one time. Like I was just like literally just standing there at the front, and this dude just like bulldozed me, and it was just one of the most awful experiences of my life.
Yeah. I know when I first started filming the fest in Calgary, like there was a lot of people being like, Calgary Hardcore specifically was like very, very, like, for lack of a better term, ignorant when it came to like moshing. And so like, was that always the case, or no. has it been diluted over the years?
It's been diluted. Like everyone would kind of just like, crowd killing and stuff like that wasn't a thing. Like when I first started going to shows, everyone would just be like, just normal dancing and stuff like that. It's not until recent years where people just started like hitting people on the sides and stuff like that.
Yeah. Do you have a take as far as like whether like, how to be sensitive towards that? Cause like, everyone like, I'm sure you've seen lots of Sonny's work where he's just talked about the horseshoe when it comes to like so many people don't want to be close to the front because they are afraid of someone, hitting them unintentionally or intentionally. So it kind of creates this like, misconstrued shape of the show versus everyone, piling to the front.
I think it's the horseshoe. I think that kind of evolved because people don't want to get hit, even like just at all. And then if someone's in the front, like it might just happen.
Right.
And like some people don't want to get like, like what happened to me. Like I didn't want to get concussed or, right. You don't want to, like a lot of the newer kids, I think are more scared of coming in because they could probably hold their own, but they just kind of are like, I don't want to get hit. Sure. Like I've seen like the coolest thing is I see more girls take out dudes now. Like,
true. Yeah.
Nikki is crazy. Like that girl can hold her own.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I remember seeing some of the Scope 2-year videos where she was moshing and it was almost like she was like a spin top, like a Beyblade, just like going absolutely nuts. To jump back on subjects, because I definitely wanted to kind of pick your brain on some of the earlier Calgary hardcore, because I'm sure a number of people are going to be listening and watching this. As far as the venues, you were mentioned, and hardcore overall I think struggles when it comes to venues. A, finding something that's all ages, and B, understanding just the weird mentality of what we like to do. We like to pack into a small room, play loud music for 20 minutes a pop, and all get home around 11 p.m. So was there some early staple Calgary hardcore venues that maybe aren't anymore, and any stories about those venues that you want to share?
The Multicultural Center was a huge one. They just had shows like there was a show when I first started going to shows every week, Friday, Saturday, but like, they would change. Like sometimes his name is Mike would put on hardcore shows, and those would be mostly like Edmonton bands, Calgary bands, some touring bands.
Yeah.
Then that got torn down. I'm not sure when it actually got torn down. And then Carpenters Union Hall, which is like smack dab in the middle of a community in Kensington, like in Calgary, downtown. The Warehouse and the Underground were big ones too.
Okay.
And that turned into like a nightclub or something. I don't know. I don't remember. But yeah, like the Underground was where Underground and the Warehouse was like where 10 for 10 was.
Okay.
And all those venues don't exist. And then like a lot of stuff happens. Like I think a lot of people, bigger bands are going to places like Dickens and stuff. And I hate that there's not really all ages hardcore shows anymore. But I think it's kind of changing, like where shows are licensed and all ages, which is cool. But, I miss hall shows and stuff too. But
yeah,
they're kind of a liability because it's funny because like it seems that some of the like hardcore like kids and stuff, like they kind of changed to like what I was like at punk rock shows, like everyone just drinking outside the venue and stuff like that.
Sure.
So like I think it's like a lot of those venues that get lost, it's like because it's a liability, or like I don't know for a fact because I don't put on shows. Like maybe like the owner of the venue would come and there'd be beer cans everywhere or whatever. And
yeah, like I think with venues too, like they're without preserving that and treating it with the dignity that it deserves, like realizing that it's not just a hardcore space. Like the first place that comes to mind is like for sure Commons, because when Evan Shaw was alive and doing shows there, like I remember there was some issues where they were talking about like we would have a show on a Saturday, and then the next Sunday is like a service, and then the churchgoers are finding cigarette butts and empty beer cans. So there was some, shout out to all the kids who were like, we're going to make sure that we can have some canisters that people can put these butts into versus like, oh, I have a cigarette. I've never smoked, so I don't know how you make those decisions, but even if we want to jump up to Edmonton, a venue that I was frequently filming at for some all ages shows was it was like King Edward Park Small Hall, and it was just like a community center, a really kind of like not too long but not too narrow room, and bands would play there. Everyone from like Times Tide, False Body. I know like Viva Non did like a set there, so a variety of different shows. It got fucking hot in there. Not that I'm remembering it, but shows weren't allowed there anymore because kind of the same thing. People drinking outside, people leaving the door open, and it's like right in a neighborhood, so like you're just hearing feeding like grind music in like 8 o'clock at night. So yeah, there definitely needs to be, I guess maybe a promoter needs to be more aware of just like how like certain things of those nature, but obviously the people who are going to those shows like treating those spaces with respect.
Yeah, like I'm not gonna say I've never done it. I've never.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not gonna ever say I threw a beer can on the ground, cigarette butts on the ground, drank outside of shows. Like I've done it all. Like, and it's different now because I haven't been to a show, and I don't even remember. That's how long it's been since I've been to a show.
Yeah.
But yeah, like going back to what you were saying about like sweaty venues and like.
Yeah.
I remember going to a Misery Signal show in Edmonton, and you could literally just take the flyer and stick it on the wall. Like no tape, anything. And it would just like hang on there the whole night.
Yeah. Wow, that's really funny. It's like what's that? It's not As Seen on TV. It's like that thing where you slap it on and it's like pouring out water and it like stops it. I'm blanking on the name.
The only thing I can think of is like in Vegas Vacation where Chevy Chase like puts the gum in the like water hole because they're at the Hoover Dam and he starts like blowing up.
Yeah. Someone who's listening is like shouting at their, at their computer or however they're listening what it is. It's not anyways, let's move on.
Yeah.
And you were mentioning as far as like, you've been going to shows for a while. I guess like, this is a pretty general question, but like what has been like the thing that has kept you because I feel like a baby as far like we were DMing and you were like, yeah, I have like I was going to shows when you were in diapers theoretically, and I still feel really early as far as I think I first started like playing in just hardcore bands around like 2012 2013 even, but I still feel like very novice as far as the people who have been doing it for 20, 30, even 40 years. So like what has been the thing that has kept you for as long as it has, despite the changes in life, moving to different parts of Canada?
I think the thing that kept me around was just friendship. Like it was a lot really different back in the day. Like everyone would hang out. If there was no show, everyone would hang out. And just I kind of steered off for a while and like was whole like my music kind of progressed where I kept listening to like heavier music, but like something always just brought me back to hardcore because I prefer the music. And then like I'm getting like I think some of the cool things that I see, and it's just like how cool hardcore is as a community, is the way that I felt when I first heard Converge. Is how some of these kids like would feel like the first time they heard Vane or Code Orange.
Right. And
I think that just like, it's a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. There is always like those formative, like when it comes to like the really pillar bands are always going to, everyone can jump online and say like, oh, these are the gateway bands. But I think everyone has that, whether it's a local or a big name band that like really took them to that next level. For me, seeing Means play their last show in 2008, that was like that was like the people into what the hardcore world is. And then I'm thinking about like Trapped Under Ice being like, oh wow, this is like really hard, raw hitting music. Like it doesn't need to be like overproduced post-hardcore metalcore shit. And I could go on. But yeah, I think there for me, and I'm sure you feel similar to this, and I'm sure a lot of people listening are too, is like I've never thought about like I'll be out of hardcore by the time I'm this age. Like there's never been an expiration date for me.
No. And it's funny that you say that, because there is some people that just like, I've seen a lot of people go to like, I've seen a couple people go to like electronic dance music and stuff and just kind of go to more DJs and stuff. Yeah. But the best way to describe it is, it's funny that you just said it like that, because I was thinking last night about it, and it's like, have you ever seen the Metal documentary?
Just the Metal documentary?
It's called Metal, of the Headbangers
No,
Journey.
I haven't watched it.
Oh, well, there's an interview with Rob Zombie, and he's like, metal's a thing, like hardcore's a thing, you stay in it. It's like, I've never met the guy that said, oh yeah, I was in a Slayer one summer. No, I meet the guy that's got Slayer carved in his arm.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that's with a lot of people that I know. Like, everyone listens to different music. Like, a lot of people might laugh at this. I'm a diehard Kelly Clarkson fan.
That's sick.
Like, my thing is, you can't listen to brutal music all the time, or like, sometimes you gotta be mellow. Like, I still listen to Dashboard, Say Anything, like bands like that, and diehard Kelly Clarkson fan. And
what made you a diehard Kelly Clarkson fan? I'm just curious.
Have you listened to her?
That is fair. I like Kelly is the one that was on American Idol,
the very first one.
Very first one. Yeah, she's an OG as far as that goes.
I don't know. I just always thought her music was catchy.
Yeah.
I think it was because like when I was around 18 and I was trying to finish high school, I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment with 2 guys, and it sucked. And my mom would pick me up, because this is bad to say, but my mom would pick me up for school when I'm 18, and to make sure I got to school. And the only thing I could tolerate listening to her car was Kelly Clarkson, or like, I think we would listen to like Bon Jovi.
Yeah.
But like, I hate Bon Jovi, but like, he's got a couple songs.
Right. Yeah. He's got a couple like staple dad rock jams, but yeah, shout out to Kelly. That's awesome. I think, I honestly can't sit here in front of you and say that I've like dove into an entire Kelly Clarkson album, but I'm definitely going to do that after we're done this podcast. Is there an album that I should download on my Spotify right now?
Breakaway?
Okay, I'm literally going to do that as we're recording. Kelly Clarkson. Breakaway. Is there an album that people shouldn't listen to?
Her Christmas album.
That's fair. I'm downloading it right now. Sweet. Cool. Yeah, I do think that you need to have, like I think everyone's different when it comes to music. Like for me, like I can really focus on doing like chores around the house, or just like, kickstart my day with like some hardcore or metal music, and some days I'm just like, I can't listen to that or anything. But sorry, you go.
Yeah, I fully get that. Like, so there not being much to do in the town that I live in, I started skateboarding again.
Okay.
But like, so because my fiance works at a restaurant, and so she's gone, so she has the car. Mm-hmm. And so if I need to get anything like pop or anything, like I have to skateboard to Co-op or the local convenience store. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, just like when I'm skating, like I prefer to listen to pop punk and punk in general, or like lots of hip hop and stuff like that. And I get in moods where I want to listen to heavy music, but I kind of switch it up. Like I can't. Converge is one of my favorite bands, but I cannot sit and listen to Converge all day.
Right.
Especially like when I'm driving to work at 7 a.m.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there is a little like, I don't know, associating different bands with like different tasks or times, like even like I'll listen back to like certain records and I'll like instantly be brought back to like a road trip that I did with like my wife or a bunch of homies, and it's like we're just only listening to like that Citizen album or this hardcore record or whatever it is. On the topic of just like music in general, like what's the biggest, like, I'm sure you've seen a number of different trends in hardcore over the past number of years, so what has maybe been like your favorite, and what has stood the test of time versus like, oh, everyone was doing this and like it definitely doesn't hold up nowadays?
Maybe like a lot of, like, I prefer a lot of the earlier bands. Like, I'm still getting into like new bands, and I still like bands like Bitter End, Trapped Under Ice, stuff like that. I listen to a lot of, like, I guess more of them. Like, I think the mainstream hardcore bands will kind of always exist, like all the ones that play the fests and stuff, like
Madball and
yeah, and like I can't vibe Nick Knocked Loose. I can't get into them at all, but I'm sure if I gave them a shot. But yeah, that's the kind of trend. Like, it's cool seeing kids go to older bands too, like Cro-Mags, Madball, like Agnostic Front, bands that have been around for years and years and years. Mm-hmm. But I haven't seen like a really. There was like, it kind of jumps around because there was like the big like Christian, like Means, Figure Four. Like, I don't consider Figure Four like a Christian band, but like the Face Down Records, the Solid State Records bands.
Right. Yeah.
I
guess
Blood
like
and Ink,
Comeback Kid, when they first started, they were like technically, well, like someone can correct the record, but I heard that at least at the beginning, Comeback Kid wasn't maybe like we're a Christian band, but like some of their song material and lyrics were around some of those spirit-filled hardcore ideas, but definitely not anymore.
Yeah. Because I remember like when I first got Turning Around, there were two covers because I bought one at Christian Publications, which was a Christian bookstore that also sold like Face Down Records and Solid State Records.
Yeah.
Comeback Kid had to make an alternate cover because the one had the guy like holding his heart and it was like all bloody.
Oh, yeah.
So and then there's another copy. It's just a gold like boxer like this.
Interesting. So they had something that they were like, okay, like we're gonna have to make something that's more PC or Christian friendly
to sell in Christian bookstores.
Wow. And that's hilarious with Christian metal bands like As Lay Dying or Plea for Purging, where like some of their covers were probably even more gruesome or not PC or whatever.
Well, I think As Lay Dying kind of went out the Christian train when Tim tried to kill his wife.
Yeah, it was, that's always it's always weird when something like that, or just like a band gets canceled. It's like, it's hard for me to listen to some of those records, but when I can't deny that, like, listening to Shadows Are Security or any of those earlier As Lay Dying, like, I like Through Struggle was one of the very first songs that I tried to like teach myself how to learn on guitar. But now I'm like, I'm not going to go and listen to that band because Tim like tried to kill his wife. So, yeah, that's always strange. Totally jumping topics because I definitely want to hear this story. Sworn Enemies stayed at your house once.
Yeah. They are crazy dudes.
Yeah.
So I think it was Sworn Enemy and Scars of Tomorrow stayed, and they were playing on a Hatebreed tour.
Okay.
With so they just all like the old house I used to live at. There used to be, I lived in a community called Queensland in Calgary. And 2 blocks from each other, there was the punk rock house and there was the hardcore house. And it was a bunch of friends. So all the kind of punk rock kids, like crust punks, lived in one house. Hardcore kids lived in the other. Okay. And then we just kind of like always offered bands if they needed to stay. Like Textbook stayed there a lot. Sworn Enemy stayed there. Cancer Bat stayed there. And like we just always like had our floor open to whoever wanted to stay. And then Sworn Enemy was just like, we want somewhere to party. So we're like, okay.
Yeah, that's I've had very few opportunities to have bands stay at my place. But the one of the only times was actually probably one of the biggest, because it was, I forgot what the tour package was, but two bands I was there to see was a band from Alabama called Gideon, and then another, I think they might be from the same area, called 100th. They've like really changed like musically, but one of the merch guys like noticed like I was wearing some windbreaker, and he's like, "Oh, is that this?" And then we started talking. He's like, "Hey, do you have any ideas like of, we need a place to crash tonight?" And I was still living at home. This is, I think I was like still in high school, so like 2011 or something like that. So I was like calling my dad, being like, "Yo, this band that I like needs a place to stay." And we're like, my dad would always say like we're very blessed. So like we kind of had like a big basement, big couch, and I know these guys are just like looking for any floor to like, sleep on. So I eventually convinced him. I go back to the guy. I'm like, yep, we're good after the show. We can just roll through. He's like, cool. Can 100th also stay? So now I went from like 5 members to 10. So I had to call my dad again and do the whole thing. And that was just a crazy night, because everyone's like getting their stuff, and then like the guitar player's like showing me like early Gideon stuff. This is like just before their second album, but I really think it's really cool when I don't know many other genres of music that encourage just like this. Yeah, come to my house, eat my food, use my utilities. Like that inclusivity of taking care of one another based off like almost no knowledge of like what the other person is about.
Yeah. And like, that's what's cool about hardcore, is everyone's really accepting, and, they do what they can to help out people. Like you notice a lot with like GoFundMe's now and stuff like that. Like, because all those scumbags of the earth like rob bands and stuff, and it's cool to see that like bands are still out touring even though that stuff happens to them, and people like are like, well, maybe I'm going to the show, so instead of buying a t-shirt and a CD, I can buy one from each or whatever, just to help them out.
There's always like this just constant desire, I think, generally speaking, in hardcore, where it's like taking care of one another. And I think those moments of being at shows or like hanging out with people outside of the show, letting bands come to your place and do, like, that's where a lot of these relationships, like you said, like they start to form. And then, like I can sit here and be like, I could probably go across Canada and even down into the States and know a couple homies that I can like shoot a message, not to use them, but to be like, hey, I'm in town. Like, let's get together, do whatever. So yeah, I think that's really special. And you don't see that anywhere else.
No.
Yeah.
There's all those bands, like, it's funny because you see like hardcore bands play to like, 500 people or whatever, and they need a place to stay. And then you'll see like the like rock cover band that is on tour for some odd reason, and they're like demanding like hotel rooms.
Right. Yeah.
Like, I'm sure I could waste a little bit of water and some food for one night.
Right. Yeah. I remember when 100th and Gideon stayed, my mom was like arguing with the vocalist because I think this is just before this big surge of like people being vegetarian or vegan, but he was like the only vegan in the band, and she made this big breakfast for everyone. Like, shout out to my mom, but he couldn't eat anything because it was like had butter and milk and all that kind of shit. And she was like arguing with him, like, I'm not letting you leave this house until you like take something. So she like cut him a grapefruit and just like put sugar on it. And he's like, yeah. And like, I just have this vivid picture of my mom arguing with Chad, and I'm just like, this is so weird. Like, what is happening? Was there ever a band? Do you have any like funny stories of certain bands that have come through and stayed at your place and just something funny happening?
Not really. I have some really weird stories. the first time Nikola Tesla was going out of province, they were going to BC to play a show in Kelowna. And me, Jeff, I think Phil came. He was like this, like one of the old sound guys. And someone else, I forget who it was. It may have been Brian, the drummer of Nikola Tesla. Because my parents lived like 2 blocks away from Brian. And we ended up like going to, like, none of us could sleep because we were all so excited to leave in the morning.
Okay.
And then, so we ended up going to like 7-Eleven at, like, half the people that were like awake and couldn't sleep stayed at my house. And then the ones that wanted to sleep stayed at Brian's. And then we ended up going to like 7-Eleven at like 12 at night. And like, I forget what actually happened, but we ended up like following this dude, and like something like made us feel like he was just really weird. And like we called the cops, and he was like driving around. And then like we find out like a couple hours later on the news that he like got busted with like thousands and thousands worth of guns. Whoa. And he was like on his way home to like kill his wife, I think.
That's insane.
That's probably one of the weirdest ones.
Just something was like, you know, maybe you're excited, but maybe you just had to stay up to save some lives.
And then Die Young stayed at my house, and I'm not going to get into severe details, but one of the members used the restroom, and we didn't have a plunger at the time. And it's true what they say: everything is bigger in Texas.
Jeez, wow.
So you can picture how that story ends.
Right, yeah. No, I think some stories are better left for the imagination to complete it. Awesome. Well, Andrew, this has been a really great podcast. We should start wrapping up. Is there any show stories, any kind of like words of wisdom you kind of want to send us off with before we bookend the show?
No, but I want to say you're doing a great job. I think it's really cool what you guys are doing. Everyone out there, like Potts, when Evan was alive, Jay, Cody, I don't know him personally, but Curtis Left Hand, Nathaniel, Cole, like all those dudes are just doing so much for Calgary Hardcore. I think it's really cool. Did I say Potts?
Yep.
Okay. And if I'm forgetting anyone, I'm really sorry. I like Nikki, and I think her roommate Jess put on a show not too long ago, which is really, really cool because women should be putting on shows, especially everything that's, you know, happening around now.
Yeah, 100% back that.
And I would, if I was there, I'd fully support it. And like Skinny and who he does his shows with, John Kennedy in Edmonton.
JFK, yeah.
There's just so many dudes and girls that like women that are just killing it, and it's so cool to see and listen to Trench.
Yeah, hard recommend you listen to Trench if you haven't. Yeah, I totally agree. I feel very very grateful to be, you know, this very, very small cog in the Calgary Hardcore wheel. And I think, you know, together with the guys who are doing the fest, Nikki and Jesser who are doing these all ages shows, Derek and Skinny who are doing shows, you know, working with, you know, the multitude of other people on the Scope team. It's almost like, you know, slowly but surely it's really, you know, turning the gears and pushing the envelope forward. So I'm really,
and it's really cool to see.
Yeah. And I appreciate that, especially coming from someone who's been around for so long to see the ebbs and flows. So that's sick.
Living in a small town, I survive off you guys.
That's true. Yeah. Well, I hope that Andrew, you had a blast on this podcast. I'm really glad that we got to sit down and chat, and I'm sure we'll chat more because we actually haven't had much face-to-face time in our, you know.
Yeah, hopefully it was eventually soon. I just thought it could have been nice to come on and hear some old stories about Calgary Hardcore, make some people laugh with everything that's going on. Just kind of, you know, some people just need a good laugh every now and then, and who better to laugh at than a fat guy named Hammy.
Well, I appreciate it, Hamtaro. So awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Andrew.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course.